I am a painter in the city of Plymouth, working hard on large-scale projects which attempt to consider aspects of the human condition. I have a large library specializing in philosophy, metaphysics, and art history. I intend to donate my library, artifacts and paintings to the city for the sole purpose of the provocation of thought.
Robert Lenkiewicz, painter, philosopher, maverick, a man with a lifestyle that was as colourful as his paintings. Up until his death in 2002, aged just 60, he was a celebrated figure on Plymouth's Barbican, a striking presence respected and misunderstood in equal measure. His studio a hub for his students, friends, and the many local people who sat for him.
He would have at least 10 models planned for the day. So he had a diary of who was coming that day. He would have the floor marked on, where the chair would be placed and where his easel would be placed. It was ordered amidst the chaos. I mean, if you ever went to the studio, it was enormous. It was 60 feet square, probably, and from floor to ceiling, just covered in paintings. His paintings were like symphonies. Grand, huge, so dramatic. It was full on, but ordered.
Robert wasn't good at getting out of bed. I think Robert would probably get up around about 9:30, 10 o'clock. I would go over to the studio, knock on the door, he'd throw a key out the window, we'd go in, put the kettle on. There was no cups, no mugs. We would drink out of milk bottles.
Lenkiewicz grew up in the hotel for Jewish refugees run by his parents in London. Inspired to paint after watching a film about Rembrandt, he was accepted at St Martin's School of Art at 16 and later attended the Royal Academy. By the age of 24, he'd relocated to the West Country, his ambition for large-scale projects already apparent.
How long have you been working on it now?
About 5.5 months ago I got the commission, but I've actually been working on it solidly, shall we say, 1 month.
Well, it really is a magnificent work, and this is it complete, I suppose.
No, there's more in the other room if you want to come to see.
I mean, you're working in 2 rooms at the same time?
That's right. Just finally pulling it together as a whole eventually.
Oh, well, let's go and see the rest of it, shall we?
This is...
I see what you mean, yes. This is the rest of it.
Yes, this is the rest which goes on the opposite wall to the whole bar. There's one on one side, then you look over the bar, and there it is on the other side. This is just supposed to be a sort of dock scene just on the harbour. See behind it, a few people sitting around drinking about and so on.
Lenkiewicz's later output would be dominated by 20 large-scale projects on thought-provoking themes like jealousy, suicide, his own relationships with women, death, mental health and vagrancy.
He did these big projects because they were the parts of society that we weren't looking at. And Robert did highlight issues about vagrancy and mental handicap and many issues that weren't being looked at, and showing you the real underbelly, the bits that society doesn't want to show, but really what makes up society. And he made these huge themes, a bit like a kind of modern-day conceptual artist, His work was very intellectual about ideas just as much as about the making of paintings.
He was an artist who responded to real life, real people. He wasn't somebody who was obsessed with the tiny compulsions of the art world. He was somebody who looked outside himself and often depicted it. And one of the reasons why I've always been fascinated by Robert's work is because he had the bravery to confront something which was extremely unfashionable. He has subjects. He paints vagrants, derelicts, all sorts of people in society in a way which you would expect artists to paint now.
Like many great artists, Lenkiewicz's skill and vision has become more appreciated since his death. The privately owned Smithson Collection brings together some of his most important works.
His mantra for teaching was, let every mark be a thought and every thought a clear one. That's quite hard work, but you could point to any of his paintings, even the bottom square inch, and there'd be a reason for the mark made. What was the thought? The thought might be, that's half tone, that's a warm colour, I want a thick paint, or I want thin paint. You have to be responsible for every mark you make. He was just such a fluid painter. He never seemed to hesitate or struggle. He never measured, and he just loved the paint itself.
I'm sitting with a very attractive woman. What am I thinking about? Am I really thinking about this white paint and whether the tone is too hot or whether the tone is too low or too cold? I'm thinking about those sort of things for a second here and a second there, and I think, God, I wish I had a cup of tea, or I'd like to have a cuddle. All sorts of impulses have got nothing to do with the painting whatsoever. I'm wondering, you know, whether an accomplished painter like, say, Velázquez, the Spanish painter, really painted the personality, the head of someone, in any different way to painting her bottom.
I think he did think that painting was overrated, but for him it was a necessity, and he loved it, and he saw himself as a presenter of information as well as a sociological inquirer about the human condition. It was just what he did.
Robert had obsessions. He was very, very intense about different topics. And I think with the punk rock era, it was something that no one ever saw and we thought was outrageous and anarchy, and I think it really interested him.
These punk paintings are fantastic examples of early 80s British Southwest life, of the kind of desperation of young people and rebelliousness of young people. They're the great portraits in a way, because they will speak forever to every new generation, because they talk about so many issues about being young.
At the heart of the Smithson Collection are many of the pictures inspired by Lenkiewicz's relationships with the women who shared his life.
You don't expect your artist to live a conventional life, but his life represented the true concept of the word freedom, in the sense that you explore all facets of yourself and life. If society calls it a taboo, you might say it's not, and your instinct tells you it's something to do. So he did have lots of girlfriends and lovers and put himself in incredible situations, but I would say in a way that was, for me, the clearest idea of what freedom truly means, because he wasn't drinking alcohol, he wasn't a drug taker. It was all about the physical spirit of being alive.
Sometimes it's hard to see beyond a beautiful woman on a painter's lap. So people might miss the subtleties of the delicious tonal range, the poetic paint, the scumbling of the paint. And he was trying to do different things. He wanted a very rich palette, because that sort of went along with the hallucinations we all have about being in love. There are all these sort of multi-layered ideas going on in the paintings, but he wanted to heighten the realism, apparently. So everything was polished and finished, and very, very rich colours, and he particularly enjoyed painting fabric. He just really enjoyed capturing different textures and colours. This painting of Robert with Janine, I think it's one of the stronger ones in the collection. She's got such presence about her. It's just a really believable head. There's a lot of weight there, and he's really enjoyed painting the red dress. I mean, red's quite tricky to control as a colour, but it's just deliciously painted. And I like the vertical format, that she's standing and he's sitting behind her.
One of Lenkiewicz's most intense relationships was with the woman he named Mary. His third wife, she would inspire some of his most striking portraits.
She looks slightly haunted in this picture. There's a very strange up kind of lighting, a very dramatic light, like it's almost candle-lit atmosphere. So it has that erotic quality of when you're with a new lover and you are kind of being haunted by that late evening light, lamplight or candlelight. You're not saying it, but you're looking at them in a most powerful way, intimate way, and you're kind of so in love with that visual look of them. But he was incredible at this period.
As the relationships ended, there was inevitably a sense of loss and sometimes jealousy, a theme that inspired a whole project.
There's an amazing portrait as a kind of man who is suffering with his entrails, still yearning for the woman that has left him, and his entrails are coming out snake-like, trying to reach her, but their pus ensued and they're grotesquely ugly. And I think it's just a brilliant example of trying to convey the loss of a beautiful woman that has left you, that feeling of your insides feeling like they've been pulled out. But it's also an incredible painting. The head has such a psychological intensity. She brought a kind of Latin, South American spirit to her personality. I think she had a very, very deep kind of presence about her. This picture is an incredible intensity, almost Northern European in the way the landscape has been painted. Every leaf, every blade of grass. It's a wonderful painting. The sense of startledness, the visceral quality of the guts, and this woman totally self-absorbed in her own space and world. It makes this one of Robert's most powerful paintings.
If you look at the technique of his paintings, you associate him with a competent figuration. But if you look through the recesses of his oeuvre, you know, he does all sorts of weird things. He's a great individual with a great variety of styles and some interesting ideas about contemporary society, his contemporary society.
The Smithson Collection also brings together some of Lenkiewicz's self-portraits. A striking and charismatic figure in real life, these have become iconic works.
Some people might think it's vanity, but actually, you know, you're your best model at the end of the day. You don't have to say to the model, left a bit, right a bit, you're cheap, you can carry on for ages, and you can really investigate the human face. Robert used to say, when you're doing a self-portrait, imagine you've never seen that image before. It's quite hard to do, isn't it? Because you see yourself in the mirror every day. But I think they go deeper. It's like a personal journey. What I like about the self-portrait with Courbet is he was sort of paying homage to Courbet. He was one of his heroes. And the self-portrait takes a back seat. It's actually a different colour range from the painting of Courbet. Robert's all subdued in dull, cool colours, whereas Courbet is sort of celebratory, warm oranges and reds. It's a very clever play of the key of colours. What he's doing, he's looking at himself in the mirror and he's trying to decide upon the tones. So where he's seeing a dark tone, he's using a dark colour. He's demonstrating that he knows very well the tone of colour, because every tone has a colour. So for the mid-range, he might use a green. For the very light areas, he might use a yellow. But it means that if you understand the tone of colour, you can mix paints much more efficiently. And the black and white copy of it shows he was pretty damn good.
When you take the best 200 paintings of Robert's, they hold up to any painter of his time. That's an amazing full-length portrait from the Education project. There's about 3 or 4 individual portraits in that show that were startlingly great portraits. And this is one of those ones that just has a beautiful, straightforward, very honest, very unguarded intimacy. And that's when he was at his best as a painter.
All the private collectors of Robert's work are doing a very important job in preserving the best parts of an oeuvre until that time arrives when the public galleries acknowledge that these artists are valuable and their work is collectible.
I think some of his work will become very important. He's a maverick. He's a kind of English eccentric. His story is so colourful and so interesting that he might survive longer than lots of artists because there's never going to be another story in British art quite the same.
It's a clever trick. It is truly an art to maintain the sensation that life is extraordinary and inexplicable, without a desire to hunt it down for truths, all of which will pass. And the feeling of enrichment, of feeling significant to oneself without being too much of a public nuisance, is, I think, one of the profoundest tricks to learn in this extraordinary business of living.
It's in the paint in the end. In the end, it's in the character, the timbre, the quality of the paint. Not just the colour, not just the shapes. It's in the quality of the paint, like a handshake. I suppose one sloshes away, looking over one's shoulder with slight embarrassment to make sure that one isn't caught out at the crime.